Hello, a pleasant day to everyone. This is a compressed version. The previous slides, the previous PowerPoint presentation should have been recorded, but I forgot somehow to press the record button, so it was not successfully recorded. But no worries, I have this compressed version. A lot of concepts are similar with the previous ones, but I'll try now to focus only on a few things that are really essential prior to you jumping to the implementation stage. Okay. In context, this is with the assumption that you already have your proposals, your defended proposals. However, your proposals may, during your proposal presentation, it may not have been discussed thoroughly. The contents of your instruments, mainly on the ideas of it establishing its psychometric properties, and therefore you are not yet allowed to proceed to implementation stage, which is really data gathering, which is highly dependent on the instrument that you would be using, especially for a quantitative research. But I would wish to add, of course, a very important aspect in the data gathering, that would be in the triangulation. So after this discussion, I'm expecting that there may still be a few revisions of your manuscript, and the revisions are necessary revisions so that you would be at least assured that the data that you would be gathering would be clear, concise, and valid, coming from valid and reliable instruments, and therefore you won't have much worry with regards to the data analysis and in your chapter 3 and chapter 4 of your papers. So now the focus would be triangulation and psychometric properties of the instruments. Basically, we would be planning for triangulation. I just hope that you would make it part of your intention, of your proposal. Really, with triangulation at the back of your mind is really very important. And of course, focusing on validity and reliability of your instrument. How would you be able to establish both, and when is it most appropriate? Now, when you talk of triangulation, basically it's combining data from different sources to study a particular social phenomenon. By that, we avoid just being one-sided, and therefore we avoid being dubbed and being perceived as being biased. Okay, in a research, it's very important that you would be looking at different angles of the story so that you could present your information complete and free from doubt from the readers and even the panelists. But there are different ways of arriving at triangulation. Here are the following. One is data triangulation, when you would be using multiple data sources in a single study. So in a single study, aside from getting only from interviewing only from one group of respondents from the students, you would get a 360-degree perspective by also gathering data from another source, which may be coming from from the parents. Others may be coming from their friends, and so on. It really depends whether it's appropriate and suitable for your studies. Say, for example, in faculty performance, if it would only be coming from the dean, then baka sasabihin there's bias in there. Favorite ng dean to. Then dapat may pang-balance doon. Diba? Therefore, we also gather data coming from the perspective and point of view of the students. At yun yung pinaka-influential. Kasi kayo ang mga students would really be the recipients. You are the frontliners in so far as observation of the performance of the teachers are concerned. At pwede rin coming from the peers. The faculty would also be evaluated by their co-faculty. So 360 in a sense that you are looking and evaluating at one particular topic or variable, but you are relying not just on one perspective or one source of data, but many sources of data. You may also try to look into this in data triangulation. But It could also be investigator triangulation, although this is a bit rare in our case, but possibly this could be done when you would be having interviews or even subjective interpretation of the data. When you would be using multiple investigators or researchers to study a particular phenomenon. Magkasundo kayo, isa ang topic nyo. And yet, gawa kayo ng sarili nyo, gawa rin yung iba, but you have the same direction, you have the same intention of your study, and you'll try now to converge, compare the results, and come up with a unified one. And another is theory triangulation. It may come from one source, but how you interpret the data, okay, the interpretation of the data would be dependent on the theory, and the theory would really be reflective of the perspective that you would be using. Okay, in one phenomenon, when you try to use a psychological theory of Freud, psychoanalysis, pwedeng iba ang pananaw nila doon. Okay, however, just to balance things, you could also try to look into the biological aspect in viewing a particular behavior. That's another theory or perspective, and you could also try to use another theory on sociological or psychosociological theories of behavior, and by that you are trying to balance the point of view or perspective in your study. What's important there is you try to declare the theories that you use and the intention why you use three different theories in trying to attack a particular phenomenon in an attempt to understand and discuss it further to the readers. Another is methods. Okay, you try to utilize different methods, and this is common for a mixed methods study. Kaya nga mixed methods, aside from observation, gumamit rin siya ng interview, gumamit rin siya ng questionnaire, and by that, different sources of data pa rin ang pinag-uusapan, but the source would be on the manner of gathering the data, and then in the end you'll try to integrate the results of your study. Now these are different triangulation types that you may want to consider, although not at all times you should be forcing yourself to look for ways to triangulate the data. Not at all times. Okay? Kung pwede lang, yun lang yung dapat gagamitin natin ito. And kung nararapat ba siya. And kailan dapat gagamitan ng triangulation ang iyong study. Well, these are common scenarios. One is if you are confronted with a complex question, a question that may not really be answered straightforwardly, coming from one source, coming from one perspective, so kailangan talaga maraming anggulo ang gagamitin natin. Or if you would be confronted with dissimilar data, iba-iba naman kasi ang sinasabi, especially with performance, performance of faculty, performance of students, hindi lang dapat nakarely sa grades, di po ba? Marami ring anggulo doon. How about even in the grading or even in the giving of proficiency awards? It's not just the grades, okay? Meron na ring coming from the guidance that you do not have pending cases, you have a good moral character in a sense, and dahil wala ka pong violation, na major violation na na-commit, and so on. Another is poor quality of data kapag kulang, limitado lang. You only have a very few for a quantitative research, so there's a need for you to triangulate. Or insufficient nga ang data. Or if the data is trend data, data that are only highly dependent on particular seasons. And, totoo lang yan for this year. Next year, iba na yan. So, really, trend data ang tawag yan sa mga. And as a rapid response, yung mabilisan, kailangan agad-agad. At kailangan immediate ang makukuha mong data. Pero to resolve yung worries na mabilisan yan, gumamit ka naman ng maraming pamamaraan. Or it could also be an alternative to research. It's really highly encouraged, but not at all times. Okay? Now, another focus, and you should be concerned about this, before you would be presenting your results of your study, just like in a band, bago kayo aakyat dyan sa entablado at kakanta, dire-diretso, kaharap ang inyong mga panelists, dapat hindi kayo sintonado, or at least man lang yung inyong mga tools na ginagamit ay well-tuned. Wala na tayong magagawa siguro kung sintonado kayo. Hindi, really, it's up to you. But it would definitely help, or it would definitely affect on the negative na side of it kapag hindi po maganda ang pagkatono ng ating instruments. Okay? And in the research, instrumentation reflects or refers to the data gathering instrument, mainly questionnaire, interview guide kapag quali ang ginagamit natin. Okay? So, ano dapat ang steps? My strong recommendation really is to adopt a questionnaire for a quantitative research. And adopt would mean an O, A-D-O-P-T, adopt. When you say adopt, there are already many available existing standardized questionnaires, psychological tests, available yan, mga yan. All you need to do is look for the most appropriate test na pwedeng gamitin in context of your study and use them as is. Wala kayong babaguhin. Okay? You just try to borrow that questionnaire. Of course, cite kung kanino galing yan. And of course, determine whether ethically you are allowed to use it, just acknowledge the name, or whether you need prior permission or consent coming from the authors themselves. And maganda nga po yan kapag ganyan. They would lend their authority, their prestige to you kapag yan may mga kilalang tao, and they would be very generous naman in allowing you to use their instrument kasi plus points rin po sa kanila yan. At the same time, you also benefit from it. Okay? And it is packaged. Once you would adopt, gagamit ka as is talaga ng isang questionnaire, kasama na po doon ang theory, kasama na rin po doon ang process on how the test was developed, including how validity and reliability were established. So, kuhanin nyo lang yung mga yon, i-cite nyo yung mga yan in your manuscript na you're already done with your instrumentation. Bawas ka ba? However, there are instances, and it should be rare instances, wherein the object of your study, your variable of your study, does not yet have an existing available psychological test or standardized test questionnaire for it. Wala pa. Unique ang study nyo. Assuming wala. Or kung meron mang nakita, parang kailangan i-twist them kasi may mga terminologies, may mga konteksto sa tanong na hindi tayo makaka-relate. Mamaya may tanong dun about history of the US, na malay natin hindi tayo makaka-relate masyado, then therefore there's a need for you to revise to make it more applicable to your study. If that's the case, meron kang available standardized questionnaire, meron kang i-modify doon kasi kailangan for your study, for the intention of your study. We call it adapting the questionnaire. Adapting with an A. A-D-A-P-T. Adapt. Okay? When you say adapt, hindi ka gumawa ng sarili mo, nanghiram ka ng existing, and yet you are just revising, modifying. If that's the case, hindi na ganun ka sakit sa ulo, medyo masakit sa ulo, kasi you really need to recompute for validity and reliability estimates. But the good thing is that the theory would still be given. Questions are in there already, konting tweak na lang, at you would have somehow that confidence that when you do the pilot testing already, you gather the data and you analyze the reliability estimates, more or less pasado yung mga yan. Okay? However, in the worst case scenario, wala po talaga. Wala ako nakitang hawig sa rec. There really is a need for me to create one. And actually, in many instances nga sa MA level and even in a dissertation level, the development of a psychological test is a stand-alone thesis or dissertation. Yun lang yung intention nila gagawa. Okay? But in our case, we create an instrument not as an end in itself. We create an instrument para magamit natin to gather the data for the purpose of answering the statements of our problem. So, maliit lang siya na component in our study, and yet, madugo po ang proseso sa paggawa. And paano po kadugo ang proseso? It goes through the rigid process and procedures of developing. First is, you should define your variable, given na dapat to, coming from your paradigm and coming from your statements of the problem. And you should be able to identify the indicators of the variable. And there would be two types of approaching this. Either what would be the evidences to reflect, to manifest this variable that I'm trying to measure, or what would be the factors that would lead to having these variables. Yun yung indicators. Later on, you would understand why is it important to determine ano ang perspective na ginamit mo in test development, whether it's reflective or whether it's constructive, because it has something to do with the most appropriate reliability analysis tool that you will be using. But anyways, let's try to proceed with this. Next is you try to construct items based on your number 2. Okay, you already have your indicators guided by the theory, guided by the review of related literature, and then you now try to spell it out as item questions that can be answered by your respondents. Okay, and their answer should have corresponding scales also, but before that, you try to subject them to phase and content validity. Take note, draft pa lang po ito. Meron ka ng tanong. So, more or less, meron ka ng muka ng iyong questionnaire. When it would be subjected to phase validity, the experts would just simply look at it as a whole, and they would now have an idea already whether you are on the right track or not. Kapag sasabihin lang mukhang okay siya, and then at least pasado ka na doon. Okay, it's because of their expertise that they are able to detect right then and there whether failed ba yan o hindi, whether there's a sense to move forward o hindi, whether it's valid or hindi. Okay, but after that stage of phase validity, it's not enough. Going higher would be content validity. And content validity ay hindi lang po simpleng pagtatanong sa iilang mga validators. And sir, sinabi po kasi nagtanong ako sa 5. Ano sabi nila? Okay daw po. Then, okay na raw po. It's not really the content validity that we are asking for. Although in essence, it might be the same. But content validity does not reflect just the totality of it. It should be per item. And there is a procedure for that, which I will be requiring you to do. Content validity. Okay, take note, sa number 4 pa lang po tayo na developing an instrument. After this, kapag pumasa na sa content validity, mag-iisip ka ngayon based on the question, what should be the value for each response? What would be the responses and what would be the values that you would be assigning? Would it be 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4? Would it be always, sometimes, rarely, never, or whatever that would be? There should be a conscious decision about it. Next is, meron ng mukha talaga. Medyo pulido na konti kasi it went through already the process of phase and content validity. All you need to do is try out muna to a few subjects na naobserbahan mo. Say for example, 5 people of the same characteristics with your intended respondents. Observe, saan ba sila kumunot? Saan ba sila nagtatagal? Meron ba silang tanong? And so on. It's because sila point of view. Okay, it's a simulation na point of view of the respondents. Mamaya kasi you understood kasi ikaw naman gumawa niyan. However, hindi naman ikaw ang sasagot niyan. Ang sasagot niyan would be the respondents. If there are words in there that they may find ambiguous, that they may find confusing, those are things, those are clues na dapat yun yung mga i-revise nyo. Okay? May mga areas dyan na akala mo naiintindihan, based on their responses, based on how you observe, on how they answer the questions, kailangan palang ayusin. Then, number 7 is you try to rewrite and revise based on those observations coming from the first tryout. Okay, so meron ka ng version 1, after rewriting, you already have your version 2 of your final draft. Okay, however, after this, kailangan mo pa rin niyang i-try out. Try out, this is already now the process of pilot testing, that number 8. And pilot testing would mean, ibibigay mo siya sa 20 to 30 respondents, hindi actual respondents mo that you would be using for your study, but kahawig dapat na characteristics. Okay? The intention is that so that you could compute number 9. Number 9 is validity and reliability estimates. It's more really of reliability estimates. Ito yung tinatawag nating CRONBACH'S alpha. Normally, but not at all times pwedeng gamitin si CRONBACH'S alpha. After ngayong makuha ang resulta ng number 9, you try to revise depending on the recommendation of the analysis. Then you already have your final manuscript. You revise, then you administer the instrument. Hindi po siya isang upuan. It would go through a rigid process. And you would only be using this if you will be modifying the questionnaire or you would be creating your own questionnaire for the purpose of your study. Now, I highlight on reliability and validity. Kailangan natin tong i-establish. Kailangan nyong maipakita sa akin to prior to me allowing you, giving you a go signal to proceed with the data gathering of the study already. So, paano ba gagawin tong dalawang to? Ano bang ibig sabihin ng mga ito? Let's try to go back with what I mentioned earlier on the models of test development. When you try to construct the indicators to measure a particular variable, yung bilog na yan, reflective construct and formative construct, that would be the variable that you would wish to measure. But sometimes, for you to measure something, you'll try to look into sa first muna, sa reflective construct. What would be the evidences? Say, for example, you would want to measure happiness. If you are using a reflective construct, what would be the evidences of happiness? How would you know whether someone is happy or not? Kaya nga siya reflective, yung arrow ay palabas. Y1, the construct number 1, would be, or the indicator number 1 would be facial expression. Di po ba? You would know whether someone is happy or not sa facial expression. Another would be outlook in life. Another would be health. Ang taong masayahin, healthy. Ang taong laging may problemang iniisip would be sakitin. And these are evidences that someone is happy or not. Pwede po yung ganon. And based on those things, one is facial expression, another is outlook in life, another is health status. Gagawa ka ngayon ng questions about this so that you would now be able to measure happiness. Pwede po yung ganyan, reflective construct po ang model ng test development. But not at all times ganon ang diskarte ng paggawa ng questionnaire. Sometimes, ang paggawa ng questionnaire is a formative construct on the other side. Makikita nyo dyan. Instead of happiness, anong ebidensya? It's happiness, what would lead to happiness? Nakikita nyo yung arrow? Indicators would lead to that formative construct of happiness. Ano ba ang nagko-contribute ng happiness? Y1 could be money. Tama siguro yan. When you don't have money, parang apektado ang happiness mo. Pag mayaman ka, solve ka sa financial na aspect mo, most definitely you will be happy. That's one. Y2 would be work siguro. Konektado rin naman. Y3 would be family support or relationship. All of these things would contribute papunta sa pagiging happy mo o hindi. nakikita mo yung difference ng dalawang yan. So, it's really up to you. Ang very common is reflective construct ang ginagawa natin. Okay? But if you would be using reflective construct, pwede mong gamitin si Cronbach's alpha. If you are using formative construct, you should not be using Cronbach's alpha. Okay? Now this is just a matter of comparing the two. No much further discussion for this. Pero ito yung importante. Okay, for phase and content validity, pwede po yan sa whether reflective or constructive ang ating ginagawa. Okay? Pero, pag measure po ng reliability, etong reliability of internal consistency, pwede lamang pong gamitin yan kapag reflective construct ang ginagamit natin. And although it is being covered in here, hindi ko yata mailipat to, ang natatakpan dyan na technique suggested would be Cronbach's alpha. You would only be using, therefore, Cronbach's alpha if you are using reflective model in test development. Okay? Now, kung reflective model nga ang test development na ginamit mo, we will be using Cronbach's alpha to measure reliability of your instrument. And it simply means dapat closely related yung mga yan. Meron siyang internal consistency. Okay? The magic number is 0.70. You would be assisted by a statistician for this or your advisor kung alam. At kung alam nyo rin, and then you would seek help from other experts. If it would fall below 0.70, it would just simply mean na hindi umabot ang value para sabihin natin na reliable na nga or acceptable na nga ang isang item. Therefore, you need to revise, you need to delete a particular item. Okay, pero kung hindi po kayo gumamit ng reflective, ang pwede pong gamitin natin to establish reliability would be exploratory factor analysis at EFA. But this is deeper, this is more difficult compared to Cronbach's alpha. Now, kapag magbibigay kayo for pilot testing for purposes of reliability testing, dapat 20 to 30. Kapag validity po ang i-establish natin, ang focus natin is content validity. The assumption is tapos na yan sa phase validity. And in our content validity, I will be requiring you to use Lausch's method. And we would have at least 5 expert validators. Okay? Ito po yung scaling pala sa reliability. When I say 0.7, ito yun. Acceptable yan. Pagbababa na po yan, it would range from questionable to unacceptable, which is not a good thing. If higher than 0.70, it would range from acceptable, good to excellent. At yun po yung ita-target natin. Okay? Now, this is just a sample of a reliability analysis. In general na to, per indicator na to. First indicator, kunwari LMS, I don't really know what LMS means. Naka-code lang kasi. May 7 questions ka dyan. Ang Cronbach's alpha mo dyan is 0.708. Therefore, it's higher than 0.7. Interpretation yan acceptable. There is no revision needed. Hanap tayo ng lower than 0.70. Ito yung MF. Kikita nyo. MF, 6 items yan. Ang kanyang kabuuang Cronbach's alpha for the 6 items is 0.522. The interpretation is poor. Kapag ganito, you dig deeper. Tingnan mo yung resulta ng Cronbach's alpha analysis at meron dong tinuturong anong item number ang dapat na i-delete or i-revise. Sundin nyo yan so that you would substitute now that particular new Cronbach's alpha scale sa 0.522 na dapat higher than 0.7 pa rin. Okay? So, ito yon. Kapag bumaba, kunwari 0.544 ang kabuuan sa 5 items na yan, titingnan mo ngayon yung specific per item. Ito yon. B1 is first item, B5 is the 5th item. So, there are 5 items all in all. Ang titingnan po dapat yan is dito, yung final na column. CRONBACH'S alpha if the item is deleted. Therefore, kapag binura mo raw si item number 2, ito yon, magiging 0.784 ang kabuuang CRONBACH'S alpha. So kung binura mo si item number 2, from 0.544, palitan mo siya ng 0.784. That's how you do reliability analysis and revision of its results. Now, how about content validity? It should be a simple exercise, a simple procedure. CVR, or content validity ratio, just simply would want to evaluate the essentiality of an item. At meron tayong simpleng formula lang dito. You just try to replace it. NE is the number of panelists na nag-agree, nagsumagot na essential. N, the capital N, is ilan lahat ng panelists, and then you try to replace. Ang magic number dapat natin dito depends on the number of validators. Katulad po nito. Okay? When you would be subjecting your questionnaire for content validity, sasagutan yan ng at least 5. Yun yung requirement natin, at least 5 validators. At paano nila sasagutan? Para silang respondents. Na instead of you would have your questions, ang scale niya is always, sometimes, often, never, rarely, never, palitan mo yan, lalagyan mo siya ng 1 is not essential, 2 is useful but not essential, 3 is essential. Kasi ang validators ang magiging respondents nyo pansamantala for purposes of establishing validity only. Okay? Papalitan nyo yung responses per item. So that kapag i-compute mo na, take note na it would vary with the number of panelists. Kung meron kang 5 panelists, dapat lahat yan ay mag-agree. Kasi 1 ang computation. Kapag may iisa lang sa kanila ang sumagot na 2, iisa lang sa kanila ang sumagot ng 1 in a particular item, kailangan pong i-revise agad yung item na yan. Okay? So, how about validation process? Same concern. Or spelling pa rin yan sa previous na slides that I provided you with. The validation process would start with the selection of the validators. Mamaya kasi, tama ang procedure, and yet, sino ba ang nag-validate? Questionable, doubtful ang kanilang expertise. Hindi po dapat yan. You should be very careful with this. And when we say expert validators, their expertise would mean they have expertise that are aligned to the topic. Yes, sir, expert to kasi engineer to eh. Ano ba ang topic mo of your study? Walang kinalaman sa pagiging engineer. Ang may kinalaman dito is dapat RPM, RPsych, guidance, and so on, depending really on the context of your study. So it should be aligned when you try to select expert validators. Hindi necessarily doktor. Hindi necessarily maraming pinag-aralan. It could be based on experience, they are considered experts on the field. It could be with the credentials, a mix of many things, training. It could be the specialization that they have. Okay? Bago po ibigay sa kanila yan, there should be communication, formal communication, to document the process of validation. There should be a letter attached inviting them to serve as validators for your study, and you try to lay down the required information about your study. And then you try to prepare, yun nga, may questionnaire ka na binago mo na yung options para sasagutan nila. Ang options ay 1, 2, and 3 lamang. And then you try to tally the result, analyze and interpret, and titingnan kung meron bang kailangan i-revise depending on the results of the analysis of content validity. So, paano ba dapat ang itsura nun? Just like this, you would have your questions in here, palitan lang yan dyan, and then ito ang magiging options of their responses. Point of view ng isang validator, ganito ang nakikita ko. Kunwari, number 1, ang sagot ko dyan is 3. I-check ko to. Check ko rin to. Lahat ng sagot ko ay 3. Isa pa lang yun. How about the other 4 validators? Dapat lahat sila ay nag-agree na essential or pare-parehas dapat ang sagot nila na 3. Kung merong isa lang na lumihis dyan dito, 2 ang sagot niya for item number 1, then you need to revise item number 1. Okay? Lilima lang naman sila, and you try to choose also yung may accessibility and the willingness, of course, to participate in your study as expert validators. And take note ha, wala dapat bayad to. Simple lang naman ang gagawin na, although they are lending their expertise for this, there should be no payment for this. Ang possible lang, possible, I'm saying possible only, na merong financial arrangements would be dun sa reliability analysis, the computation for CRONBACH'S alpha. Pero, as a rule, kasama na dapat sa kanilang statistical services. Therefore, kung mag-iisip kayo ng isang statistician, ang pasok nyo dapat, ang involvement nyo dapat ay starting with the reliability analysis already. So, dapat walang extra na fee for this. Okay? So, I just hope that I was able to give justice to your time, and hopefully there's now a clear link from proposal, from what you prepared in your conceptualization and then the planning of design phase going towards implementation. This is very, very important. But what's important also is that in this phase, you should still be guided by your advisor. We follow these general guidelines. You try to discuss among yourselves if you are a group of researchers, and you also try to discuss with your expert advisor. But you should try to comply and adhere to the general standards and procedures that I just laid down to you this day. So that would be it. Thank you for watching and understanding this. Should you have further questions, please do not hesitate to type in, key those in the stream, in the comment box, in any platform that we use for our class. So that would be it. See you and keep safe, everyone.